The easiest way to hide greatness is to cover it with rust. Mason Reed never forgot those words. His father had said them years ago while standing in a crowded salvage yard surrounded by twisted metal and forgotten machines. Back then, Mason was just a teenager learning how to turn a wrench. Now, 20 years later, the words returned to him as he guided his aging pickup truck toward the largest supercar event in the state. The parking lot stretched across nearly 40 acres. Exotic cars filled every available space. Ferraris, McLarens, Lamborghinis, Bugattis, and custom hypercars worth millions of dollars gleamed beneath the morning sun. Thousands of visitors moved through the gates carrying cameras and merchandise bags. For many enthusiasts, this was the biggest automotive event of the year. Sitting beside Mason was his 10-year-old son, Noah. The boy pressed his face against the passenger window, staring at the endless rows of machines. "Dad, look at that one." Mason smiled. "I see it. And that one. I see that one too." Noah laughed. The excitement in his voice made the early drive worth it. For months he had talked about attending the event. He had memorized horsepower figures. He knew engine specifications. He could identify most supercars before they passed. To Noah, today felt like Christmas morning. Mason pulled into a designated exhibitor lane near the rear entrance. Attached to the truck was an enclosed trailer that looked older than nearly every vehicle around it. The paint was faded. Small scratches covered the metal panels. The trailer looked completely out of place among the luxury transport rigs arriving at the event. Security personnel directed traffic while event staff checked credentials. Everything proceeded smoothly until a woman wearing a headset stopped near the trailer and frowned. She looked at the paperwork. Then she looked at the truck. "Hold here." Mason nodded. A few minutes later another staff member arrived. Then another. The atmosphere changed. Noah noticed it immediately. "Dad?" Mason glanced toward him. "It is fine." Across the entrance plaza, Claire Harrington stepped from a black executive vehicle. As founder and chief executive officer of Harrington Automotive, she was the public face of the event. Reporters followed her. Cameras turned toward her. Guests approached for photographs. At 38, Claire had built one of the fastest-growing luxury performance brands in the country. She moved through the crowd with confidence and purpose. Then her attention shifted toward the small gathering forming around Mason's trailer. One of the event managers approached her and quietly explained something. Claire looked toward the truck. Her expression hardened slightly. She walked across the pavement surrounded by assistants. Mason stepped out of the truck. Noah remained inside. Claire stopped several feet away and examined the vehicle, the trailer, and Mason himself. "Sir, this entrance is reserved for approved exhibitors." Mason handed her a document. "I am registered." She reviewed it briefly. Then looked back toward the trailer. "What exactly are you bringing into my show?" Mason answered calmly. "A car." Several nearby staff members exchanged amused looks. Claire folded the document. "This event represents the highest standards in automotive excellence." Her eyes moved toward the weathered trailer again. "I do not believe whatever is inside belongs here." A small crowd had started watching. Phones appeared. Conversations slowed. Noah looked through the truck window toward his father. Mason remained completely calm. Claire handed the paperwork back. "I am going to ask you to leave." The word settled over the entrance like a sudden silence. And for the first time that morning, even Noah stopped smiling. For several seconds nobody moved. The crowd waiting near the entrance watched the scene unfold with growing interest. Some assumed Mason would argue. Others expected him to protest. Instead, he simply looked at Claire Harrington for a moment and accepted the paperwork she handed back to him. "Understood," he said. The calmness of his response seemed to catch several people off guard. Claire gave a brief nod before turning toward her staff. The matter appeared settled in her mind. Another exhibitor had arrived. Another decision had been made. The event schedule continued moving forward. Mason returned to the truck without another word. Noah watched him carefully as he climbed into the driver's seat. The boy looked toward the entrance where rows of exotic cars gleamed beneath banners carrying Harrington Automotive logos. "Dad, we are leaving?" Mason started the engine. "Looks that way." Noah stared down at his hands. The excitement that had filled the drive that morning was gone. The truck slowly pulled away from the gate while luxury transport trailers continued entering the event behind them. Several spectators had already lost interest. To them, Mason was simply another man who did not belong. 10 minutes later they were driving along a quiet industrial road on the edge of town. Neither spoke much. Mason focused on the road. Noah watched warehouses pass outside the window. Finally the boy broke the silence. Was she right? Mason glanced toward him briefly. About what? About whatever is inside the trailer. Mason smiled faintly. Do you think she was? Noah immediately shook his head. No. Why not? The boy looked surprised by the question. Because you built it. Mason said nothing. Noah continued staring through the windshield. You always know things other people miss. The words hung quietly between them. Mason remembered late nights in the garage. Countless weekends. Scrap parts collected from salvage auctions. Components rescued from machines everyone else considered worthless. Most people only saw old metal. Mason saw possibilities. An hour later they arrived at a weathered building hidden behind rows of storage units. The structure looked ordinary from the outside. Faded paint covered the walls. The roof had been repaired more than once. Nothing about it suggested anything remarkable existed inside. Mason parked beside a large roll-up door and climbed out. Noah followed. Together they walked into the garage. The familiar smell of steel, oil, and machine work filled the air. Tool cabinets lined the walls. Shelves overflowed with parts. Fabrication equipment occupied one corner. At the center of the shop sat the trailer that had caused so much attention. Mason opened the rear doors. Sunlight spilled inside. Noah's mood immediately changed. There it was. Low. Aggressive. Unfinished in places. The body panels carried different shades of metal and primer. Nothing about the machine looked polished. Yet even standing still, it possessed a strange presence. Mason stepped closer and ran his hand along the roofline. Noah smiled. They should have let them see it. Mason looked at the car for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and checked his phone. A notification had appeared moments earlier. He opened it and read the message. His expression remained unchanged. What is it? Noah asked. Mason looked back toward the vehicle. A national performance challenge. Noah frowned. What does that mean? Mason's eyes settled on the machine again. The event would begin in exactly 72 hours. And for the first time in months, the car might finally have somewhere to prove itself. The garage remained illuminated long after sunset. Outside, the industrial district had fallen quiet. Most businesses had closed hours earlier. Inside, however, time seemed to move differently. Mason Reed stood beside the unfinished machine while Noah sat on a rolling stool near the workbench. The challenge announcement remained open on Mason's phone. 72 hours. That was all the time left before some of the fastest and most advanced performance cars in the country gathered for a nationally streamed competition. Most teams would arrive with engineers, sponsors, support crews, and million-dollar budgets. Mason had a toolbox, a small garage, and a son who refused to stop believing in him. Noah looked toward the car. "Are we really going?" Mason studied the vehicle before answering. "Maybe." The boy grinned. "That means yes." Mason shook his head slightly and returned to work. A welding mask rested nearby. Data screens displayed performance figures collected during previous test sessions. Sheets of handwritten calculations covered a table in the corner. Anyone walking into the garage would have assumed the place belonged to a mechanic. Very few would have recognized what they were actually looking at. The machine occupying the center of the room had been built piece by piece over 4 years. Salvage auctions. Wrecked performance cars. Discarded aerospace materials. Components nobody else wanted. Mason had spent countless nights studying weaknesses hidden inside expensive production vehicles. Every mistake made by major manufacturers became a lesson. Every failed design became an opportunity. Around midnight he connected a diagnostic computer and reviewed the latest performance data. Numbers filled the screen. Noah walked over carrying 2 bottles of water. "Good?" Mason looked at the results. "Not yet." The boy frowned. "It is faster than before." "It needs to be more than faster." Noah nodded even though he clearly did not understand the technical details. What he understood was effort. He had watched his father spend years solving problems most people never noticed. The next morning began before sunrise. Mason loaded equipment into the trailer while Noah organized tools. By noon they were alone on a private stretch of pavement outside the city. The machine finally rolled into daylight. The unfinished bodywork still carried mismatched colors. Bare metal appeared in several places. To most observers it looked incomplete. Even rough. Yet the proportions felt different. Purposeful. Mason climbed inside and started the engine. The sound was not loud. It was precise. Controlled. The kind of sound that made experienced engineers pay attention. Noah watched from behind a safety barrier. The car accelerated down the pavement. Seconds later it disappeared toward the horizon. Mason returned several minutes later and parked beside the trailer. He reviewed the data without showing emotion. Noah stepped closer. "Well?" Mason stared at the screen. Something unusual had appeared in the results. The numbers were higher than expected. Significantly higher. Even he seemed surprised. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he quietly saved the file. Several hundred miles away, professional teams were spending millions trying to gain tiny performance advantages. Mason had just discovered something inside a scrap-built machine that should not have been possible. And neither of them realized that within the next 24 hours, the first pieces of that mystery were about to reach the internet. The video appeared online just after sunrise. Nobody knew who uploaded it. The footage lasted less than 30 seconds. A rough-looking machine accelerated down an empty stretch of pavement before disappearing into the distance. No branding. No sponsor logos. No professional production crew. Just raw footage recorded from a handheld phone. Under normal circumstances, almost nobody would have noticed. Yet one detail immediately captured attention. The acceleration data displayed in the corner of the screen. At first people assumed the numbers were fake. Automotive forums dismissed it. Social media users joked about edited footage. Several popular influencers reposted the clip simply to mock it. The machine itself only made things worse. The unfinished body panels looked mismatched. Bare metal remained visible. Nothing about the vehicle resembled a polished supercar. One comment received thousands of likes. Someone built a spaceship out of scrap metal. Another called it a junkyard experiment. Others laughed at the appearance. Yet as the day continued, something unexpected happened. Engineers started paying attention. Not internet experts. Real engineers. Professionals who spent their lives studying performance data. By afternoon, discussions had shifted. People were no longer talking about how the car looked. They were talking about the numbers. Several analysts independently reviewed the footage. More than one publicly admitted the acceleration figures appeared possible. That was where the real mystery began. Because if the data was genuine, the vehicle should not exist. Hundreds of miles away, Mason spent the day inside the garage making final adjustments. He paid almost no attention to the growing online discussion. Noah, however, followed every update. The boy sat near a workbench scrolling through comments. "Dad." Mason continued tightening a component beneath the rear section of the car. "What?" "People are arguing." "About what?" Noah smiled. "About your car." Mason shook his head slightly. "It is not my car yet." The boy laughed. He had heard that answer before. The machine was never finished in Mason's mind. There was always another problem to solve. Another improvement to make. Another weakness to eliminate. Later that evening, a major automotive channel released a reaction video. The host spent nearly 20 minutes analyzing the footage frame by frame. Millions of viewers watched. Several professional race engineers joined the discussion. Most remained skeptical. Yet none could explain one thing. The efficiency numbers. They simply did not match what should have been possible from a vehicle built from discarded components. Meanwhile, preparations continued at the National Performance Challenge. Teams arrived with transport trucks, engineering crews, and support staff. Expensive equipment filled paddocks. Luxury brands displayed polished machines worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Among the participants was Harrington Automotive. Claire Harrington personally attended the event. Her company had invested heavily in its latest performance platform. Industry media considered them a favorite. During a briefing meeting, one engineer pulled up the viral video. Several people laughed. One executive called it internet nonsense. Another suggested the footage was fabricated. Claire barely glanced at the screen before returning to the meeting agenda. To her, the mystery car represented nothing important. Just another online distraction. Yet elsewhere, Mason finished reviewing the final data logs. He closed the laptop and looked toward the machine resting quietly beneath the garage lights. Less than 48 hours remained. And the very people dismissing the car as a joke were unknowingly preparing to compete against it. The following morning began with rain. Thin gray clouds drifted across the sky as Mason and Noah pulled onto the highway with the trailer behind them. The competition venue sat nearly 300 miles away. Most participants had arrived the previous day with large crews and transport fleets. Mason traveled with a pickup truck, a toolbox, and a boy who spent half the drive reading comments about a car nobody could identify. Every hour the mystery seemed to grow. More videos appeared online. More engineers joined the discussion. Several experts claimed the acceleration figures violated accepted assumptions about weight distribution and efficiency. Others insisted hidden modifications explained everything. Nobody knew the truth. That uncertainty only increased public curiosity. By late afternoon the competition grounds had become a small city of performance machines. Luxury transporters filled the paddock. Engineers moved between garages carrying laptops and diagnostic equipment. Media crews prepared live broadcasts. Sponsors displayed banners across nearly every building. Noah stared through the windshield as they entered the facility. "This place is huge." Mason nodded. "It usually is." Registration took less than 10 minutes. Most officials barely looked at the truck. Several competitors, however, noticed the trailer immediately. Some recognized it from photographs circulating online. A few exchanged amused smiles. Others pointed discreetly. One mechanic standing near a polished European hypercar laughed when Mason backed into an assigned space near the edge of the paddock. That has to be the Internet car. Another shook his head. No way it survives the first session. Mason heard the comments. He continued unloading equipment without reacting. Noah heard them too. Unlike his father, he struggled to hide his frustration. They have not even seen it yet. Mason secured a jack stand beside the trailer. People make decisions quickly. That is not fair. Mason looked at his son. Fair is not the goal. Noah frowned. Then what is? Mason closed the toolbox. Doing the work. The answer seemed simple. Yet Noah had heard versions of it his entire life. As evening approached, teams prepared for preliminary inspections. Officials moved through the paddock verifying safety requirements. One by one, trailers opened. Crowds gathered around expensive machines. Cameras flashed. Reporters conducted interviews. Then a small group formed near Mason's space. The rear doors of the trailer slowly swung open. Conversations immediately followed. Some sounded confused. Others sounded disappointed. The vehicle looked almost exactly as it had in the viral footage. Unfinished bodywork. Exposed metal sections. No sponsor decals. No luxury branding. Nothing about it resembled the multi-million-dollar machine surrounding it. Several spectators laughed quietly before moving on. Yet not everyone left. 2 engineers remained. They studied the suspension geometry. One crouched lower. The other examined airflow channels integrated into the body. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally one looked toward the other. Who designed that? The question received no answer. Nearby, another inspection official reviewed the car more carefully than expected. A second official joined him. Then a third. Noah noticed the change immediately. Dad. Mason continued organizing tools. What? Noah glanced toward the growing group around the vehicle. I think they are starting to see it. Mason looked up briefly. The officials were no longer focused on appearance. They were studying details. Very specific details. And for the first time since arriving, a few experts appeared less interested in laughing and more interested in understanding. Morning arrived with clear skies and growing crowds. The first official sessions would begin within hours. Across the facility, engines started, laptops opened, and teams prepared for final checks. Mason arrived at the paddock before most competitors. Noah followed close behind carrying a small toolbox that looked insignificant compared to the equipment surrounding them. Large corporate teams moved with practiced efficiency. Matching uniforms. Dedicated engineers. Marketing staff. Camera crews. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked professional. Their small corner of the paddock looked different. Yet as people passed by, more of them slowed down to study the unusual machine. The previous evening had changed something. The laughter had not disappeared completely, but curiosity had begun replacing it. Several engineers returned for a second look. One spent nearly 10 minutes examining the suspension layout. Another focused on the cooling system. None of them seemed interested in the unfinished bodywork anymore. They were looking deeper. Near the center of the facility, Harrington Automotive occupied one of the largest spaces. Their newest performance car sat beneath. Bright lighting surrounded by reporters and industry guests. Claire Harrington moved through interviews with her usual confidence. Her company remained one of the favorites to win. The viral mystery car barely crossed her mind. That changed shortly before noon. During a technical briefing, one of her senior engineers approached carrying a tablet. You need to see this. Claire glanced at the screen. Several inspection officials stood around the unidentified vehicle from the internet videos. The scrap car? She asked. That is what everyone keeps calling it. The engineer hesitated. I do not think that description fits anymore. Claire looked at him. Why? Because nobody can explain what they found. Her expression narrowed slightly. The engineer enlarged several photographs. Complex fabrication work appeared beneath the body panels. Airflow solutions. Structural modifications. Weight-saving techniques. None looked amateur. Who built it? Claire asked. Nobody knows. For the first time, she looked genuinely interested. Meanwhile, preliminary testing began on one section of the facility. Spectators gathered behind barriers while officials monitored performance data. One by one, competitors completed short evaluation runs. Some delivered impressive results. Others struggled with setup problems. Engineers adjusted software. Mechanics replaced components. The usual challenges of competition filled the afternoon. Then Mason's turn arrived. No grand introduction followed. No media attention focused on him. In fact, several spectators barely noticed when the unfinished machine rolled toward the starting area. Noah stood near the barrier watching quietly. Mason completed final checks before climbing inside. The engine started with the same controlled sound that had puzzled experts online. Several nearby teams looked over. Some out of curiosity. Some out of skepticism. The signal was given. The vehicle accelerated away. A few seconds later, conversation stopped. Heads turned toward timing screens. Officials looked at one another. One engineer blinked and checked his tablet again. Another requested confirmation from a data technician. The run had not broken any records. Not yet. But it had revealed something far more important. The numbers were real. Every single one of them. Back near the paddock, Noah saw the reactions immediately. People who had spent 2 days laughing were suddenly asking questions. And across the facility, Claire Harrington found herself staring at a timing display she could not quite believe. By mid-afternoon the atmosphere around the facility had changed completely. The mystery surrounding the unfinished machine was gone. Now there was something far more unsettling for the established teams. Evidence. Timing screens continued displaying results from preliminary sessions, and every new data set confirmed the same conclusion. The vehicle built from discarded parts belonged near the top of the field. Engineers gathered in small groups studying printouts and telemetry reports. Some searched for mistakes. Others searched for explanations. Neither search produced satisfying answers. Back in the paddock, Mason sat quietly beside the trailer reviewing data logs on a laptop. Noah watched the growing crowds from a folding chair. Every hour more people stopped by. Reporters appeared. Mechanics wandered over during breaks. Even competitors from rival teams began examining the machine from a respectful distance. The jokes had almost completely disappeared. Curiosity had replaced them. Across the venue, however, not everyone was adapting well. Several heavily funded teams entered additional testing sessions hoping to improve performance. One manufacturer spent most of the afternoon chasing an overheating issue. Another struggled with software calibration problems. A third team lost valuable time replacing components after unexpected reliability concerns emerged. None of these setbacks were unusual. High-performance competition exposed weaknesses. Yet what made the situation uncomfortable was the growing comparison. $1 million development programs were fighting problems while a machine assembled inside a small garage continued operating without complaint. Late in the afternoon, a second round of evaluations began. Spectators filled viewing areas. Cameras followed several favored contenders. Harrington. Automotive completed a strong run that immediately climbed near the top of the leaderboard. Applause followed. Claire Harrington accepted congratulations from sponsors and journalists. The result was impressive. Under normal circumstances it would have dominated conversations throughout the venue. Instead, questions kept returning to the same subject. The unfinished car. The unknown builder. The impossible efficiency numbers. Claire noticed it. So did her executives. For the first time, the mystery was competing for attention with companies that had spent years building reputations. Then another testing session began. Mason climbed into the car again. No dramatic gestures. No interviews. No attempt to attract attention. Noah stood near the barrier exactly where he had stood earlier. The signal came. The machine accelerated down the course. This time the reaction was immediate. Timing screens updated. Conversations stopped. Several engineers stared at the results before checking them again. A reporter lowered his microphone halfway through a sentence. One data technician requested confirmation from a second system. The numbers were not just good. They were better. Noticeably better. Back near the hospitality area, Claire turned toward a monitor displaying live results. Her expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough for those around her to notice. The gap had narrowed. More importantly, the unknown car was still improving. One executive standing beside her folded his arms. "Who is this guy?" Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Not yet. As evening approached, the leaderboard continued shifting. Expensive programs moved up and down. Teams celebrated small gains. Others worried about lost opportunities. Through all of it, Mason remained in the same place. Quiet. Focused. Almost invisible despite the attention surrounding him. And while competitors searched for ways to catch him, officials were preparing to release information about every finalist the following morning. For most teams, it was a routine administrative step. For Mason Reed, it was about to become the moment everything changed. The next morning began with anticipation unlike anything the event had experienced all weekend. Crowds arrived earlier than usual. Reporters gathered near the media center. Engineers checked updated rankings before heading toward their teams. The mystery car had become the dominant topic of conversation. People still did not know much about the machine. They knew even less about the man behind it. That changed at 9 o'clock. Event organizers released official finalist profiles. The information appeared on large displays throughout the venue and simultaneously across live stream broadcasts. Team names. Driver names. Technical summaries. Career backgrounds. Thousands of spectators began reading. Within minutes, reactions started spreading through the facility. Noah saw it happen first. He stood beside a display board while several people read the information aloud. Independent builder, Mason Reed. One spectator frowned. Another looked back toward the paddock. Wait. That guy? Questions multiplied. Unlike most finalists, Mason had no corporate affiliation. No manufacturer backing. No engineering department. No sponsor list. The profile described a former performance engineer who had spent years working quietly in restoration shops, fabrication facilities, and independent development projects. More surprising was the vehicle summary. Much of the car had been built using reclaimed components, custom-designed systems, and parts sourced from salvage operations. People stared at the description in disbelief. Across the venue, engineers reacted differently. Several stopped focusing on the car's appearance entirely. They were now looking at Mason's background. Small details suddenly made sense. The unusual design choices. The efficiency figures. The unconventional solutions hidden throughout the vehicle. None of it looked accidental anymore. Meanwhile, Claire Harrington reviewed the same information inside the Harrington Automotive Hospitality Suite. At first she scanned the document quickly. Then she stopped. She looked again. Mason Reed. The name felt familiar. A memory surfaced immediately. A weathered pickup truck. A faded trailer. A man standing calmly at the entrance of her Supercar event 3 days earlier. Claire lowered the tablet slowly. One of her executives noticed the change in her expression. Something wrong? She continued staring at the profile. I know him. The executive looked confused. From where? Claire did not answer immediately. Because the realization was arriving in pieces. The man she had dismissed without a second thought was now sitting near the top of the leaderboard surrounded by engineers trying to understand his work. Elsewhere, Mason remained exactly where he had been all weekend. Seated beside the trailer. Reviewing data. Making small adjustments. Noah returned carrying a printed copy of the finalist profile. Everybody is reading about you. Mason accepted the paper. Looks that way. You are famous now. A small smile appeared. That seems unlikely. The boy laughed. Around them, more people continued arriving. Some wanted photographs. Others wanted explanations. A few simply wanted to see the machine up close. Yet the strongest reactions came from industry professionals. They studied the vehicle with growing respect. Questions replaced assumptions. Observation replaced judgment. By midday, final competition sessions were only hours away. The leaderboard remained close. Several powerful manufacturers still had opportunities to improve. Harrington Automotive remained among the favorites. But the atmosphere had changed permanently. The unknown builder was unknown no longer. And as Claire Harrington walked toward the paddock searching for a man she had once ordered removed from her event, she realized the biggest surprise was not what Mason had built. It was how completely she had misjudged the person who built it. The final session began shortly after 3 o'clock. Grandstands filled with spectators. Live stream audiences continued growing. Reporters gathered near the starting area while engineers monitored performance screens from temporary command centers scattered throughout the venue. The leaderboard remained close. Several manufacturers still had opportunities to improve their positions. Yet most conversations centered around a single name. Mason Reed. The man who had arrived with an aging pickup truck and a weathered trailer now stood among the event favorites. Noah remained near the barrier holding a small notebook filled with sketches of cars he hoped to build someday. His attention never left the track. Mason completed his final inspection with the same quiet focus he had shown all weekend. No interviews. No speeches. No attempt to enjoy the attention. He simply checked the vehicle one last time and climbed inside. Across the paddock, Claire Harrington watched from beside several executives. Earlier that afternoon she had finally approached Mason. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. She had offered a sincere apology for what happened at the Supercar event. Mason listened. Then he thanked her for coming over. No anger. No bitterness. No effort to make the moment uncomfortable. The exchange somehow left a stronger impression than any argument could have. Now both of them stood watching the same track. The signal arrived. The final run began. The unfinished machine accelerated away with remarkable precision. Spectators followed the timing displays. Engineers stared at live data feeds. Sector after sector appeared on the screens. Strong. Consistent. Efficient. When the run ended, silence settled across parts of the venue. Not because people were disappointed. Because they were calculating. Officials reviewed the results. Data technicians verified the numbers. Then the leaderboard updated. Mason moved into first place. The margin was not enormous. It did not need to be. The result was official. Applause spread through the crowd. Some competitors joined in. Others simply shook their heads in disbelief. Years of assumptions about what success should look like had collided with reality. A vehicle built from overlooked components had defeated machines backed by enormous budgets. Yet the most surprising reaction came from the people who understood engineering best. Many were smiling. Not because they had lost. Because they recognized genuine craftsmanship when they saw it. Later that evening, a small award ceremony took place beneath the setting sun. Teams gathered near the stage. Cameras recorded every moment. When Mason's name was announced, Noah grinned so widely it seemed impossible not to notice. Mason walked forward and accepted the award. The applause continued. Several reporters waited for a dramatic speech. They did not get one. Mason looked toward the crowd briefly before speaking. A lot of people helped me learn over the years. I am grateful for that. Then he paused. His eyes found Noah near the front. And thank you to my son for believing in this project long before anyone else did. That was all. No celebration. No boasting. No revenge. When the ceremony ended, teams packed equipment and prepared for the journey home. The crowd slowly disappeared. The lights around the venue began turning on as daylight faded. Noah climbed into the truck carrying the trophy carefully across his lap. Mason secured the trailer one final time. Before leaving, he glanced toward the track stretching across the distance. 3 days earlier, people saw rust, scrap metal, and a man who did not belong. Now they saw something different. Not because Mason had changed. Because they had finally taken the time to look closer. As the truck pulled onto the highway and disappeared into the evening, Noah looked at the trophy and smiled. Mason kept his eyes on the road ahead. The victory mattered. But the work, as always, mattered more.